Okay, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the MMIWG
Press
Center.
star 1. A system tone will be heard when your request has been accepted.
I didn't touch anything. I'm standing still. Is that okay? Okay. So I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional territory of Treaty 1 and homeland of the Métis Nation that we all have the privilege of living on and being here today. I also would like to take this time to acknowledge Shoal Lake First Nation 40 for the water that the city of Winnipeg uses in recognition of all of us here today. I'd like to welcome the elders, families. Okay, so don't break out into a dance. Welcome elders, families, friends, two-spirited LGBTQIA, everyone here in attendance today, but most importantly, loved ones of missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. Welcome also to Honorable Carolyn Bennett, Minister of Crown Relations, and our speakers that are here today. Welcome to our territory. I'd also like to acknowledge and recognize the Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls Manitoba Coalition and the National Families and Survivors Circle. Thank you for being here today. I'd also like to take this moment to remind everyone here that if you feel triggered at any point by today's event and need immediate assistance, for mental or emotional assistance, support is available through the Hope for Wellness helpline at 1-855-242-3310 or through the online chat at hopeforwellness.ca, which is open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. There is also a broad network of mental health and cultural supports providers available in communities through the regional First Nations and Inuit health offices. I am honored to be here with all of you. My English name is Diane Redsky, and I am the Executive Director of the MMIWG Center and was Chair of the Urban Subworking Group for the National Action Plan. My spirit name is Love Eagle from the Caribou Clan, and I'm a very proud member of Shoal Lake First Nation 40. Before going on any further, I'd like to take a moment to remember and honor the missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls and gender diverse people who were and continue to be so cruelly taken from their loved ones. I'd also like to acknowledge their family members, friends, and survivors, and the communities who have supported them. Oh, okay, he's just brushing away something. I was like, I would like to acknowledge the commissioners, staff, elders, grandmothers, and family members, and everyone who contributed to the national inquiry into the missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls, as well as all of those who contributed to the National Action Plan. Each and every person played an important role in this critically important work of truth-telling. Before I proceed, I would like to ask Sarah Delaron to come up front here and honor us with an opening honor song. Sarah?
Good morning, everyone. I was asked to share a song to honor the families and for the relatives who have passed on. Yeah, I don't have a lot to say, but I'm honored to be able to do this for you this morning. Hey na ya wa uelo janu pa wa yu ha ho ye wa yelo wa uelo hey na wa uelo yo hey ate, wauelo, wauelo, chanupawa yuhaya, hoye waielo, wauelo, ate, ate, wauelo, wauelo, yo hey. Miigwech.
Thank you, Sarah. That was incredibly, incredibly powerful. I think we, can speak on behalf of everybody here. We all felt that. Miigwech. So now I'd like to invite Honorable Carolyn Bennett to say a few words.
Kwekwe, Udlakut, Tansi, hello, bonjour. Thank you, Knowledge Keeper Sarah Delarond, for that beautiful, beautiful honor song and with your beautiful, beautiful voice. It really did open this important announcement in a very good way. And I want to offer my sincerest gratitude to Diane Redsky for not only welcoming us here at Mama Wichita Center gathering place for Truth and Reconciliation, but which is such a fitting place for today's important announcement, but for the unbelievable work that you did and continue to do as chairing the sub-working group on urban Indigenous people, an increasing priority of our government. Je tiens à souligner que nous sommes réunis ici aujourd'hui sur le territoire des traités numéro 1 et sur les terres traditionnelles de la nation métisse des Anishinaabe, des Cree, et des Dakota. And I'm grateful to be joined here by so many honored guests, both in person and virtually, and from across the country, and of course, my colleague from Parliament, Kevin Lamoureux. During this summer of reflection, as Canadians absorb the realities of the horrors of residential schools and the missing children in unmarked burial sites at Kamloops and Cowassis and so many more, the damaging legacy and intergenerational trauma that persists today. Once you know the truth, you can't unknow the truth. Canadians are now joining the journey of reconciliation in numbers unprecedented. Canadians now recognize and feel what it must have felt like to have your children taken away from you against your will, and some to never return home. Today we make the link between those damaging colonial policies, the Indian Act, residential schools, forced relocation, and the taking away of language and culture, and link it with the tragedy of missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls and 2S LGBTQIA plus peoples. I couldn't help but be moved by the small red dress behind us. This is the link. This is what we need all Canadians to understand, and it is about trauma-informed. It isn't what's the matter with people, it's what happened to them and what happened to their parents and grandparents and how it still affects them today. And that's the learning and the teachings that all of the people joining us today have taught me and are prepared to teach all Canadians. This past June, The National Family and Survivors Circle, along with Indigenous partners, governments, Indigenous women, and Two-Spirit, gender-diverse people, came together to release the National Action Plan and to end the violence against Indigenous women and girls and 2S LGBTQIA+ people. So many of you here contributed to getting us to today, to working towards the transformative change that is needed to move forward from the multi-generational trauma and marginalization that has displaced women from their traditional roles in communities and governance and diminished their power in place, leaving them vulnerable to violence. The title of the final report of the National Inquiry into Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls is Reclaiming Power and Place. That is the goal, that Indigenous women, girls, and 2S LGBTQIA+ people will have the supports necessary to reclaim their traditional place of dignity, honor, and respect. I have the deepest gratitude for all of the partners who contributed to the plan, including the National Family and Survivors Circle, who are keeping families and survivors at the very heart of our collective work through every step as we go forward. And we thank you, Hilda, and your circle for your wise counsel on this journey. Today it's my honor to announce the launch of new programs and investments that came from Budget 2021 to end this national tragedy. Our response in Budget 2021 was faithful to the themes identified in the final report of the National Inquiry: culture, health and wellness, safety and security, and justice. Today, we are announcing the funding details for supporting the work that Crown-Indigenous Relations will be able to support with partners. With the announcement of the National Action Plan on June 3rd, the Government of Canada also released the federal pathway, the federal government's contribution to the National Action Plan. This is our whole-of-government approach to address the root causes of violence against Indigenous women and girls and 2S LGBTQIA+ people. Elle décrit notre réponse à cette tragédie nationale en cours d'une manière intersectionnelle, holistique, responsable et durable. Et elle propose des actions tangibles pour mettre fin à cette tragédie nationale en s'engageant à agir dans 4 domaines clés: la culture, la santé et le bien-être, la sûreté et la sécurité humaine, et la justice. First, we are investing $108.8 million to create the Cultural Spaces in Indigenous Communities program. This program will support the building of longhouses and big houses, powwow grounds, heritage parks, and cultural centres for Indigenous groups across Canada. This will ensure that Indigenous women and girls and 2S LGBTQIA+ people have safe places to practice their cultural activities. The National Inquiry had also called for this in their final report, and this is something that Indigenous partners, such as Chief Slet from Helsik Nation, who is joining us today, have long advocated for. I know what a difference the opening of the House of the Helsik, a big house in her community, has made for the Helsik Nation and its women. And I look forward to hearing more from Chief Slet about its impacts. We are also providing $12.5 million to a new program to support the well-being of families and survivors of missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls and 2S LGBTQIA+ people. This program will offer much-needed, culturally appropriate healing and mental wellness services to those who need it. We know that Indigenous organizations are best suited to delivering services and support to Indigenous peoples in a culturally safe and respectful way. To that end, we are investing $36.3 million over 5 years and $8.6 million ongoing to better support Indigenous women's and 2S LGBTQIA+ peoples and their organizations, to help them continue their important work supporting survivors on the ground that grassroots support that so many people have called for. Finally, we are investing $24.5 million to create a new program to fund Indigenous data projects and to establish an Indigenous data advisory group and to create a permanent MMIWG secretariat to support the whole of government approach to ending this violence. This funding will target initiatives that focus on improving methodologies to produce better data by considering Indigenous worldviews and perspectives. It will also help further identify and address gaps in data regarding missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls and 2S LGBTQIA+ people to ensure that no one falls through the cracks. And I thank Corinne Dumil here who chaired the data sub-working group so admirably, and now we are proud to have her working at the Secretariat within CERNAC. We have committed to a national action plan and a federal pathway that will be effective and accountable. We have committed to regular updates to ensure that the plan and the pathway are making meaningful progress to ensure that Indigenous women and girls and 2S LGBTQIA+ people are safe wherever they live. The updates will be based upon evidence, the best possible data, and the advice of families and survivors. Together, the investments we are highlighting today represent concrete progress in implementing the Government of Canada's federal pathway, advancing the National Action Plan, and working to address the ongoing impacts of Canada's colonial policies. Ce financement s'appuie sur la base établie par le gouvernement depuis 2015, l'énoncé économique de l'automne 2020 et le budget fédéral de 2021, dans lesquels le gouvernement a proposé un nouvel investissement de plus de 2,2 milliards de dollars sur 5 ans et 160,9 millions de dollars en contenu pour mettre fin à la tragédie nationale des femmes et des filles autochtones disparues et assassinées. These investments will help chart a way forward to the transformative change that will help end the systemic racism, sexism, ableism, and economic inequality that has perpetuated violence against Indigenous women and girls and 2S LGBTQIA+ people for so long. We know that ending this national tragedy will take time, but we are all committed to embarking on this journey together. And today, I'm proud that we are taking important steps on our path forward. Miigwech, Kuyanomik, Marcy, thank you, merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much, Minister Bennett. This is, while on one hand it's a long time coming, it does feel like the work that has been done at the grassroots level, at those kitchen tables with all of those women organizations and women helping other women, as well as our relatives who are Two-Spirited LGBTQIA. Through that entire process, I have learned incredible amounts, and thank you so much for making wise investments. All of the work that you have announced has, is within the National Action Plan, and it's incredibly powerful to see that, not only on paper but come to life. And so, thank you very much for your announcement today and your leadership also on the issue. And really looking forward to working together to, we're already, I think, have a couple proposals in our back pocket. We're ready to go, and it makes it so much more meaningful when you can have a partner where there's mutual respect. And so thank you again. I'd now like to introduce somebody very special, and I do want to acknowledge that a number of the speakers today all participated within the National Action Plan, and so it's like a reunion as well to see everyone, because that process was a lot of work. That process was hard physical work. It was hard emotional work. And it took a lot of leaders working night and day, and every single one of the speakers that are here today have been working those night and day. And Hilda Anderson Perez is one of the many people who have worked tirelessly on really representing and pulling together and making the National Families and Survivors Circle a reality to what we see today. And so I'd like to ask Hilda to come up to say a few words.
Thank you, Diane, for those wonderful, kind words, and I'm truly honored to know Diane as well. She's really instrumental in doing many amazing things within our province of Manitoba, and through collaboration, we've had a lot of success. So, good morning. My name is Hilda Anderson Piers. I'm a member of the Nisitziwasuk Cree Nation, and I'm also the co-chair of the National Family and Survivors Circle. I would like to begin by acknowledging that we are in the traditional territory of the Dakota, Dene, Innu, Anishinaabe, Asininu peoples, Treaty 1 territory, and the homeland of the Métis. Our amazing circle is comprised of women who are family members of missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls and 2S LGBTQIA+ people, and who are survivors of gender and race-based violence. Our establishment last fall and our involvement in the current implementation phase of the federal pathway is supported by Crown-Indigenous Relations in Northern Affairs Canada. My sisters that I sit with within this circle are from diverse Indigenous communities, backgrounds, strengths, and capabilities. And this is what makes our circle unique, is that we come from a place of, lived experience and coming with solutions that will create a new path forward for us. Our participation in the federal pathway, the National Action Plan on MMIWG 2S, and our own contributions to the NAP entitled The Path Forward, Reclaiming Power in Place, are based on assurance that our lived experience, expertise, and agency would guide the identification of strength-based practices and actions, because that's really critical, because we want to ensure if we're participating in a process that we're seeing action. And today we saw some commitments that have occurred that are really significant in us and going forward. We really welcome these investments in new programming as part of the federal pathway, because they're critical. New programming regarding cultural spaces aligns with key short-term action identified by the Circle in our contribution to the National Action Plan. Safe, inclusive, and respectful cultural spaces are needed for Indigenous women and girls and 2S LGBTQIA+ people, families of MMIWG, and survivors of gender and race-based violence, to access culture, language, identity, and belonging. This is an important path forward to restore, reclaim, and revitalize sacred and valued positions of Indigenous women and girls and 2S LGBTQIA+ people within Indigenous cultures. And this is also very critical for healing and prevention. We're very pleased with the introduction of the new program to support the well-being, specifically of families and survivors who've been impacted. We strongly encourage proponents who will be applying for this funding to directly engage families and survivors in the development of your submissions, in the evaluation of the outcomes, and to create accountability mechanisms to families and survivors through programming. Because this is, if you're truly going to support families and survivors, they have to be involved in all processes, so it's really critical. Inclusion and accountability to families and survivors through an interconnected approach for action and ensuring direct impact is seen in the lives of families and survivors. Our circle identified 4 pillars in our contribution to the NAP and in discussions with the federal government leading up to its federal pathway. I forgot about the phone. I apologize. No, it's good. Just to make sure I don't walk away with it. Our circle is committed to advocating that these pillars are not only respected by the federal government, but by any recipient of federal funding for Indigenous women, girls, and 2S LGBTQIA+ people, including the $55 million announced today to enhance support for Indigenous women and 2S LGBTQIA+ organizations. The standard going forward must be recognition and integration of and accountability to grassroots women, girls, and 2S LGBTQIA people, 2S LGBTQIA+ people's lived experience and self-determination. In our contribution to the National Action Plan, we called for strong accountability mechanisms, not only in measuring outcomes of actions, but to monitor the process itself and how implementation occurs. We welcome today's announcements regarding data because we know data is so critical in measuring outcomes and and how things move forward, and if we need to improve or if we need to change paths. That's why data is so critical to us as Indigenous people, and it's really important that we collect data from an Indigenous sovereignty and Indigenous data sovereignty lens as well, to measure even the success of the federal pathway. Such an approach centers the lived experience and self-determination of those directly impacted Indigenous women and girls, 2S LGBTQIA+ people, and families and survivors. And we are also pleased with the MMIWG Secretariat being made permanent. Collaboration amongst all governments and Canadians with Indigenous-led approaches is key. Respectful relationships are critical to way forward solutions. We look forward to continuing our positive, constructive, and supportive relationship now and into the future. Governments, agencies, institutions, and organizations have obligations to act on the calls for justice, including those outlined in the federal pathway and the National Action Plan, including within the National Family and Survivor Circle's contribution. There has been a renewed conversation on reconciliation across Canada this year. It cannot just be a conversation. It must be action-oriented with long-term sustainable commitments. We remind all Canadians that we're all part of the solution in ending this genocide. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Hilda. It is now my pleasure to welcome Kim McPherson, who is a First Nations family member, to come up here and say a few words.
Greetings. I'm very honored to be here today for this important and critical investment announcement. I want to thank Sarah Delarond for the beautiful honor song to ground us and remember why we're here and what we need to do. And I'm also really happy to see Albert McLeod, Angela LaValle, and some of other family members that are out in the community. So you give me strength, so thank you. I am a proud citizen of Peguis First Nation in Manitoba. Our community signed Treaty Number 1 150 years ago, which we are commemorating this year. I'm also a proud mother of 2 sons, and I'm here as an MMIWG family member, a First Nation family member. We lost 2 beautiful and dear family members. My sister Jennifer Dawn McPherson in 2013, and my aunt Jennifer Johnson in 1978. They were taken from this world in a violent way. It's my hope that these investments today will help prevent more tragedies and heal First Nation communities. But we cannot do this work alone. Since I lost my sister, I do what I can to heal from our family's loss, to honor their memories by promoting awareness of MMIWG. I work with my beautiful sister, Jerry Lee Pangman, to create art and to reclaim our ancestral culture and inspire Indigenous women and girls if we can. We name our art after our sister, JDM Indigenous Designs. Our family also testified at the National Inquiry, and we were hopeful and grateful that the National Inquiry final report called for 231 calls for justice for immediate, impactful actions to rectify this unnecessary violence that's been based on historical wrongs and trauma to First Nations. It's not just an issue, a problem, or a tragedy. It's an ongoing genocide since settlers arrived. These impactful investments, actions, and an absolute paradigm shift will only happen if there's involvement and centering of First Nations families, survivors, women, girls, and 2SL plus people. They're involved in government, community, and organizational actions and decision-making. As First Nations, we are strong and have the ability to create our own laws, live our right to self-determination, and it is my hope that these investments will help to restore the power and well-being of First Nations that were interrupted because of colonization. So our truths need to be the basis for decision-making and measuring progress. As a family member, I want to see real and tangible actions and outcomes to stop the genocide of First Nations women and girls and 2SL people. We want to reclaim our rightful place in Canada as First Peoples, and today signals a step towards this. I am optimistic, despite all that has happened in our family, that the unique voices of impacted First Nations family members and survivors will be heard in their need to access support, regardless of where they live, or their affiliation, or their nationhood. I welcome the commitments of the federal government today for creating funds and programming opportunities through which First Nations-led solutions can be heard and created. It's critically important to ensure that First Nations have long-term, sustainable, and fully resourced infrastructure and support to Indigenous women, girls, 2SL, plus people, families, and survivors. This is the role of government, and they must be accountable to it. Through the announcement today, I am pleased by both the commitment to cultural spaces and support and benefit for the well-being of families and survivors on the ground. Cultural spaces allow us, as First Nations survivors, families, and communities to reclaim our identity, our culture, and our sense of belonging. To me, culture is our law, our language, our right to economies, our ceremonies, our right to a life, to participate freely as citizens, and to be healthy and strong, and have a strong sense of well-being, and live that. First Nations families who have loved ones missing need health supports as they are going through something very traumatic. Healing supports are also needed to support the well-being, to deal with this issue for families and survivors, and reclaim our wellness in and out of our communities. I'm also pleased regarding the data announcement. As sovereign First Nations, we need those investments in the community to implement our data sovereignty, and I hope to see this developed and supported at a community level. The hope we have today exists alongside the expectation that the Government of Canada, alongside other governments, institutions, and organizations, will demonstrate their commitment through concrete actions and investments that center on First Nations families and survivors' expertise and recognize our inherent Indigenous, treaty, and human rights. And that results in transformative change for First Nations and all Indigenous women, girls, and 2SL, LGBTQIA+ people. It is everyone's role to challenge injustices and ensure First Nations are all equal citizens, and no one is looked down upon or harmed or worse, killed. Imagine a world where Indigenous women and girls and gender diverse people are treated equally and empowered. There is no excuse any longer. We are all in this together, and we can all prevent more tragedies from happening. So, miigwech.
Thank you so much, Kim. So I'd now like to introduce Rebecca Kudlow, who is the president of Paktuiti Inuit Women of Canada. And I'd like to refer you to the screen. I understand she will be doing her presentation on the Zoom. Welcome, Rebecca.
Look good. Good afternoon. Today, our thoughts are foremost with the family members of missing and murdered Inuit, First Nations, and Métis women and girls and gender diverse people, and also survivors of gendered violence. In 2019, when the MMIWG inquiry released its final report, I made it clear that safety for Inuit women is complex. If we are to deal with the root causes of violence, we must stop the cycle of discrimination and cycle of physical and sexual abuse. To do that, we need the full commitment of governments and communities. If we don't work together to implement Inuit-led solutions, Inuit women and their children will continue to be in danger. With the National Inuit Action Plan, Canada now has a roadmap to address the gaping inequalities and systemic discrimination faced by Inuit women. With the establishment of the permanent MMIWG Secretariat to support federal coordination, there must be a distinction-based approach to end tragedy of gendered violence. Pauktutit and Inuit women must be at the forefront in the actions and activities of the Secretariat. This must include the monitoring and implementation and evaluation of the federal pathway. This is not a preference, it's imperative. Data collection, governance, and ownership must be addressed in this manner. We look forward to working with the government and partners in establishing a distinction-based approach for all data and data-related activities for Inuit women and their families. These concrete measures will begin the path toward in giving Inuit women, girls, and gender diverse people the same equality of life and outcomes that other Canadians enjoy. Today's announcements of the government's commitment of $108 million for cultural spaces is welcome news for Inuit families. We are encouraged that the commitment for cultural spaces will include that the Mani Inuit women and their families, both in and outside of Inuit Nunangat, cultural spaces will create conditions of safety and security and well-being for Inuit women, girls, and gender diverse people, regardless where they live. Through Pauktutit's commemoration project, we envision housing are specially designed for Red Amautit. That's, if for people who don't know what Amautit is, it's our women's coat that we carry our babies in the back to keep them warm and feel safe. These Amautit will include elements from each of the land claims regions because we have different styles in each region. These Amautit will include elements from the land claim regions sewn by Inuit seamstresses and honor those that we have lost. With $12.5 million allocated to the well-being of families and survivors, we are committed to ensuring Inuit women and their children have equitable access to meaningful supports and healing programs and services. These services are essential for Inuit women on their healing journey. We also recognize the need to have Inuit women in positions of leadership and for more Inuit-led organizations. To support this, on July 27th, Pauktutit's board members approved a pilot project to establish a satellite office in Iqaluit, Nunavut early next year. It is our hope that the satellite office will increase participation by Inuit women in our organization and ignite the creation of future satellite offices. Today's commitment of $55 million to support women's organization will be instrumental in the establishment of those much-needed sites. Pauktutit is committed to continuing to work with all levels of government and our Inuit partners to ensure GBA Plus lens is applied to the implementation of all measures of the of the federal pathway of the National Action Plan. To the Inuit families and survivors, thank you for speaking your truth. It is incredible sign of strength and resiliency. We remain committed to championing the voices of Inuit women at the national, regional, and community levels to end gendered violence. Kuyanami.
Thank you, President Kudlow. Another very important Indigenous leader, my pleasure to introduce you to Melanie Omenaho, who is the Executive Director, the leader of the MMIWG. So this is Women of the Métis Nation organization. And she's also joining us today by Zoom. And so I'd like to refer everybody over to the screen.
Thank you, Diane. I'm not the executive director, but I am the president of MMIWG. So thank you for that. I'd like to first off acknowledge that I come to you from Edmonton, which is a Treaty 6 area and the home of the Métis motherland. And I'm very proud to be a part of the historical communities in this area where the Métis came from. I'd also like to begin by thanking Sarah Delaronde for her opening song to open us in a good way and to honor the families and survivors of missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. And I also want to say a shout out and thank you to Elvina Smith, who's going to be doing the closing prayer later today. We applaud today's announcements of initially over the $200 million to support programs and initiatives to end Indigenous gender-based violence and to stop the colonial process that has made our communities look like we're a part of a disposable society. The funding signals a start to a suite of support programs and policy transformations required to eliminate this tragedy. In terms of the Métis Nation and MMIWG's work around missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls and 2S LGBTQIA+ families and survivors have always been at the heart of our work. We work in remembrance and to honor and respect and to work feverishly to end this tragedy. We applaud the Government of Canada for its commitment to distinction-based approaches to ensure that initiatives meet the realities of the First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people in this country. LFMO is specifically pleased to hear of the commitment to the cultural spaces in Indigenous communities. Our Métis-specific plan, Weaving Miskatoha, Métis Nation's journey to ending missing and murdered Indigenous women, girls, and 2S LGBTQIA+ peoples highlights that Métis cultural centers should be accessible to Métis Nation communities. These centers would provide space and opportunity for all Métis persons and their families to participate in cultural-based programming and to share traditional ways of knowing and healing. $12.5 million through a new program to support the well-being of families and survivors of missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls is a welcome announcement, but we really hope that that's just the beginning. There is going to be a lot needed to ensure that we continue to support families and survivors in the future. Through this funding announcement, we hope to see an increase in programs and support that support the well-beings of these families and survivors, and that we continue urgent and ongoing action to address crisis situations, to improve emergency management measures, and to protect vulnerable persons from the imminent threat of serious harm or death. Put simply, we must prioritize safety. The urgent steps related to physical safety and human security must precede other priorities. MMIWG commits to continuing this work until no more incidents of gender-based violence or reports of our women and girls and 2S LGBTQIA+ people missing and murdered are recorded. Investments in Indigenous women and 2S LGBTQIA+ organizations will improve systemic barriers and address irregularities experienced by women and 2S LGBTQIA+ people, and will ensure their full, meaningful, and active participation in all areas, from health to public safety, and will increase capacity and uptake in leadership opportunities. LFMO further appreciates commitments to research initiatives and in terms of MMIWG. This funding will contribute to identifying and embarking on the collection of data that is culturally based and fully understand the depth of the reality of missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls and 2S LGBTQIA+ people. A dedicated MMIWG Secretariat will play an integral role in moving forward into the implementation phase of the National Action Plan. It will take collaborative and committed efforts across Canada to bring an end to this tragedy. These efforts must be matched by a full commitment to distinctions-based approaches and investments from all levels of government to bring about lasting systemic change and to remember the effects of colonization that have impacted the Métis Nation today. I offer my thanks to Minister Carolyn Bennett and the Government of Canada for taking this important step in signaling a start to implementing lasting change required to eradicate the tragedy of missing and murdered Indigenous women, girls, and 2S LGBTQIA+ people. I also need to apologize to you, but I do have another competing meeting that I'll have to leave early for today, but I thank you for the opportunity to be here.
Thank you very much, President Ominaho. And my apologies again for not having your title correct, and I promise to make it up to you one day. So it's now my pleasure to introduce Sylvia Miracle, who is the chair of the Two-Spirited LGBTQIA sub-working group and is the former executive director, so newly into retirement, of the Ontario Federation of Indigenous Friendship Centres. So she is also joining us by Zoom, so I'd like to draw your attention to the screen.
Thank you. So first I want to offer my greetings to each of you and to your relatives past, present, and future. I want to, as part of my greetings, ask that in what you do and how you walk forward, that we will find some increased peace, which I think today offers. And I also would wish all of you who are present that we find life to be safer and with more love as we move forward. So like everyone else, I'm happy to be here. And one of the reasons I'm happy to be here is because I feel like I've been seen and heard. My friends and sisters who are on the call, who are leaders of some of the other groups, including Diane, who led Urban, I feel seen and heard. And the fact that it's only taken a year to get people to commonly use the acronym 2S LGBTQIA+ people in your statements are in itself a huge, huge reward for us and a huge step forward in addressing violence, because we have been unseen and unheard and feared and hated for a long time. And so this announcement tells me that not only have my sisters, have my colleagues, and my relatives who are here, but a minister of the Crown heard. And unfortunately, for Carolyn, I've known her for 20 years, so this has been my song for more than 20 years. And for all the young people who are here or who listen, sometimes it's a single drop of water that changes the landscape. It's a powerful force. Sometimes those are tears and people listen, and today the government of Canada has shown that it's listened, and I'm absolutely happy, fulfilled, excited to move forward. We produced a report which I hope showed the creativity that we have had as two-spirited members in a long time. All of the members of our committee were and continue to be in place members of the Two-Spirit community. They have come from Inuit, from Métis, from First Nations communities. They live in some remote areas and some rural and some urban areas, and they are looking forward to it. One of my colleagues, we were talking the other day about how many years we have been involved in this. Albert McLeod is with you in the room, and who is a member of the committee, and who has, along with a few other people, carried the torch for a long time. It is important that people understand that while we are part of a community, people who do not identify with respect to male or female, who are non-binary or who present differently, do require different supports and approaches. And building in the opportunity for specialized groups to advance and to understand and to recover their histories and their roles, and look at supporting each other is an amazing opportunity. And I think that one, not only the Indigenous community and not only the route of ending violence, but an actual gift, if you will, to Canadian society, that we can begin to understand our own isms in perhaps ways that we haven't had to before. So I appreciate the opportunity to continue to work with my friends, with my colleagues, to having a minister and a department and a secretariat behind her who will push the issues, and to the government-wide process, the Government of Canada, in terms of realizing that it may have taken us a long time to get to this point, this moment, this time, but it is absolutely the correct thing to do. And we will end up seeing less violence and more healing. Thank you for listening. Donato.
Thank you so much, Sylvia. And certainly I can, I'd like to share with everyone, as we went through our sub-working groups to develop the National Action Plan, there's not many incidents in my life where, I feel this little and super uneducated and super dumb. And the good thing about the process, I have learned so much in that time through Sylvia's leadership and with our relatives here in Winnipeg about our relatives who are two-spirited LGBTQIA. And so this is the beginning of my learning journey and how to use my voice to be helpful. And encourage all of you to read the Two-Spirited LGBTQIA report and to support organizations like the Two-Spirit Manitoba, who is here today, to do your learning and education on where you can be helpful to ensure that we are reducing the violence that is specifically targeted towards our Two-Spirited LGBTQIA relatives. So thank you, Sylvia, for your leadership on that and ongoing leadership. It is now my pleasure to introduce one of the chairs of the Manitoba MMIWG Coalition. And joining us today is Jeannie Whitebert, and she is right here. And so I'll ask her to come up to the podium.
Miigwech, Diane. And I want to say thank you. Thank you for everyone for being here. And Minister Bennett, thank you for the sema, for the tobacco, to start this off in this good way. And thank you for the song from Sandra. That's absolutely beautiful. And it's just, again, such an honor to be in this circle, to be included in this dialogue. And I'm in the midst of women and persons and organizations that have led this, who have started this work long before I came on. I want to say, Bonjour, Joanang Benese Crown-Indigenous, Mishtatim Doram Makwadoram, Dite Bene Zibing Indunjaba. My name is Jeannie Whitebert. My spirit name is South Thunderbird Woman, and I'm from the Bear Clan. I've also been adopted into the Horse Clan. My home community is Rolling River First Nations. I have the privilege to have a second community in Selkirk, Manitoba, where I've raised my 2 young adult children, Asa and Alvina Red Eagle. I'm also standing here because I'm one of 3 incoming new chairs for the Manitoba Coalition. The 3 other chairs are Renee Kasterkoff, Albert McLeod, and Tammy Wolf. And I'm really looking forward to doing the work with them and also following up on the great work that's already been done by my friend behind me, Angela LaValle, who's also, like myself, a family member and a survivor of violence. Another one of the outgoing chairs is Angie Hutchinson. So, regarding the pathway, the federal pathway that the minister has announced today, I'm really looking forward to that, to doing that work, to helping speak to the needs of the families of the MMIWG, to speak on behalf and to represent the Manitoba Coalition, because these programs are going to help work towards preventing what's been going on for so many decades. And for myself, being a survivor, being a family member of the MMIWG, one thing that that affected, I don't know, just even early on, having been apprehended. Child apprehended, mother murdered. And then going into the 60s scoop, having lost culture, heritage, language. But also, on the other side, having that strength, having that Indigenous strength and spirit within me that was never, ever disconnected from me. And coming back to my homeland, to my family, and being able to regain that culture that was reignited once I got to my family. So my hopes are that more healing will happen with this financial support. And it's also just the beginning of it, because it's about prevention, going into our communities, having that work with our neighbors, with our family, and helping the children, helping the youth regain their culture, their language, and their connection to the land. One of the things that I'm involved with is those red ribbons. And I want to show something. These families, this is what I brought here. It's a bundle. It's a bundle of spirits that are commemorating the lives of the missing and murdered Indigenous women, girls. So the prevention is going to stop this for the need for us to continue to do this, to stop having to write these names, to put these on those bridges that are hanging all across Canada. So that's what we want to do, and that's what my sincere hopes are. So I just want to say thank you, and my friend Angela, if she can say something also.
Miigwech. Echo say thank you so much for everybody who spoke before, and for Sarah for that beautiful song, and for also acknowledging the different intersections, including the little girls like my granddaughter who will not fit into that Western database. So that is an exciting part where we're going to have that sovereignty to be able to kind of represent and create and mark our spaces, and we want not to do it in that violent way anymore. We don't want to have to push. So we have all those trailblazers that we just love, and that moving forward, like the water. I love that Sylvia represented and acknowledged that water, because that's how we are. Sometimes we move still, sometimes we're just flowing together, and sometimes we have different creeks. So acknowledging all those different intersections are imperative, and the specialized spaces as well, to honor our non-binary, our LGBTQ+, and just to move forward in that beautiful way. So miigwech, and thank you so much for all your beautiful heart work, and we got this, and we're going to keep going.
Thank you so much to the both of you for speaking. That is the Manitoba, the MMIW Manitoba Coalition, MMIW2S Plus Manitoba Coalition is incredibly important to the work that many Indigenous-led, community-based organizations want to get behind, want to support, and need your direction and involvement in order to be successful at the heart medicine work that needs to happen. So miigwech for all of your work. It is now my pleasure and I'd like to invite Chief Marilyn Slett, who is Chief Counselor of the Hedesu, and I apologize if I'm pronouncing this wrong, Tribal Council, Bella Bella, BC, to speak.
Good morning, everybody. First of all, I just want to thank all of the speakers before me for their beautiful words and their strength and their dignity and resilience. And I'm grateful for each and every one of you. I also want to acknowledge Minister Bennett. It's been a while since I've seen you, and it's good to even see you virtually here today. I want to share with you, first of all, my ancestral name is Kawazit, Marilyn Slett, and I'm joining you from my homeland today, Hilda Territory, and we're located on the central coast of British Columbia. I wanted to share with you a bit about women in my community and the role of women in our governance structure and the shifts that are taking place in my community right now. We recently had reconstituted a women's council in our community, and that's the traditional name is MMIWG, and MMIWG means a woman's sister. And we have a declaration over Celtic title and rights that we signed as a community back in October 2015. And this declaration is our vision, our strength, our history, and our vision going forward to do with everything, to do with our way of life, and how we will continue to do the work that we do, protecting our homelands and our people. And we signed this as HEMAs, those are our traditional chiefs, and our elected councillors, our elected council. And our head chief, before he passed away a few years ago, when he was signing it, he said that there is a signature block missing on this declaration, and that we need to have our women also sign this, because the women in our community are the backbone and the strength and the social fabric of our people. So we back in just a few months ago in June, we did that as a community in our big house that we recently opened a couple of years ago here in the community. And, you know, that occasion was to reinstate the rightful place and responsibilities of our Heiltsuk women within our society. And the name of our council came from our high-ranking chief, Gayet, and that is the name that he put forward, and that was, you know, bestowed onto our women's council. So we are taking our rightful place within our Heiltsuk world. It's hearing all of the speakers before me, I'm so grateful for them and all of the work that they do, and advocacy and strength. And, you know, it's heartening to see that, you know, as Indigenous women, we have taken, you know, there's been a lot taken from us with the imposition of colonialism and the Indian Act and residential institutes. Our people in our community, our young people, have said more recently that these schools were not, the residential schools were not schools, they were institutes. And they were put forth to, you know, obviously to remove the Heiltsuk from Heiltsuk. So, you know, our Heiltsuk ways and relationships were broken down and weakened. But women in our community, matriarchs and umoxes, that is our name for matriarchs in our community, kept our culture alive. My father is 84 years old, and he remembers being in his aunt's homes, his grandmother's home, and we would have these really big homes in our community. And the purpose of building them so large was also to keep our culture alive. And, you know, we would hold, you know, ceremonies within the homes throughout the potlatch prohibition. And he remembers sitting on the stairway, listening to the women singing around the kitchen table, laughing and singing and drinking tea and using sticks to, you know, drum, you know, at that table. So our women really in our community, you know, kept our culture intact and alive. And, you know, despite, you know, the colonial government and oppressive policies, and, you know, these traditional ways have kept us strong for at least 14,000 years, 700 generations. We have archaeological sites and digs within our traditional territory that carbon date us back thousands of years and 700 generations. And, you know, now we are restoring and mending these fractures and renewing our relationships. I just want to share before I close here today with my comments that our MMIWG Council has been incorporated into our Constitution, and we have specific roles for our MMIWGs, and it is to foster the collective governance and enhance social, cultural, educational, economic, family well-being in the Heiltsuk Nation in collaboration with our government, with our HEMAs, and with our elected council. And they will, their objectives is to uphold and support and promote our Gwe laws, that is our laws, our Heiltsuk values, our ways of life, and for the betterment of our nation, to support promotion of health, balance, and wellness in our natural world and within our Heiltsuk community, to support our culture, language, tradition, while integrating academic education and capacity building, to build a strong sense of Heiltsuk identity and pride, and to promote healthy lifestyles that include emotional, mental, physical, and spiritual balance. We have an elected council. We're a council of 12, and 75% of our council is women, and and most of them are young women in our community. They are leaders within their families, leaders within our community. They have, a really strong sense of being Helsik, and have lived and live in both worlds. With some are lawyers, some are mental health advocates, women's advocates, and bring so much to the table. There is room at the governance table for women. We are the backbone of our communities. We hold the social fabric of our communities. So the announcement here today to support cultural spaces for women is really important. As we do and continue to do the work to protect our women, we're also restoring and reclaiming our rightful places within our societies. So I just want to thank all of you and wish you well, and you inspire me today with your strength and your dignity. Wallace Gayaksika.
Thank you. Thank you, Chief Slett. You are also very inspirational. Thank you. I'd now like to introduce our elder, Albert McLeod, who will be doing the closing prayer, and following that, we will be opening it up for questions, but I'll explain more about that later after Albert McLeod.
Thank you, everyone, and welcome Minister Bennett and the people on the panel who spoke. I was part of the 2S LGBTQIA sub-working group with Sylvia was the chair of, and creating our report for this National Action Plan and its rollout. And today some of the resources will be rolled out to communities to begin this very important work. But the basis of our work, and especially as a Two-Spirit person, I'm also the president of the Two-Spirited people of Manitoba and Winnipeg, and we began our work here in 1986 when 2 youth committed suicide. So we knew that we needed to create a community of safety around our youth, and we've not stopped since then. We recently received funding from Canadian Heritage to continue our work, and we will be moving forward doing that. Part of this work we do is not just about human experiences. And that is the contribution of Indigenous people to this history of our nation, Canada, or Turtle Island, is that we've been here for tens of thousands of years. We know this land, we know the water, we know the plants, the trees, we know the sky above, the moon, the stars, the sun. We know that movement. We know it in a way that other nations around this world do not know it, because we lived in isolation for that 20,000, 30,000 year period in North and South America. And it's only that settlers have been here for 500 years. They're just beginning to learn where they've arrived and what we know. Our cultures are deep, they're complex, and they're very sophisticated. And they are shared intergenerationally by our elders, our knowledge keepers, our grandmothers, and our grandparents. And I can tell you today in 2021 that our grandparents and our knowledge keepers and our elders left us a great legacy that still empowers our people today to deal with misogyny, colonial misogyny. It's embedded in colonialism, not just in Canada, around the world. You will see violence against Indigenous women and Two-Spirit people around the world today. And you will see genocide. Genocide is not new in the 21st century or the 20th century or the 19th century. We shouldn't be surprised that it pops up in North America. So before we began, we smudged with the help of Angela. And that is what our spiritual people tell us. We are human and we are dependent on the natural world. No matter how sophisticated we come in our urban centers, if we want electricity, we flick on the light. If we want water, we turn on the tap. And we're removed from the very origins of those gifts of life, and we forget about where they come from. Our teachings, our knowledge, and our ceremonies connect us to that very source of life and teach us the respect. So before we begin this type of work as humans, and with Minister Bennett and the work that the federal government is doing to end the violence, the misogyny, not only against Indigenous women, but Indigenous LGBTQ people, that is a lofty goal. And as humans, we know we fail all the time. We fall. We have to find that humility to understand what it is to be human in the 21st century, in Canada, with the history of colonization. That's what this is about. It's a small bit of resources to begin this journey. But what we do first, before we begin the work, is we acknowledge that spiritual world that has been here millions of years, longer than we have, right? So what we do is we do the smudge. In the Ojibwe language, the word for smudge is a babaso. It means to draw smoke. And that's what we did before we began the session today. We draw that smoke in an act of purification, of cleansing, before the spirits arrive that we are calling. And Sarah sang that song about the pipe. That is calling the spirits to be present in this room, to hear what we are talking about as human beings on this earth at this time. Those spirits will help if they can. And so from this day forward, our job is to recognize when we receive those gifts that the spirits think and know that we should have to continue this work to end the violence. I'm not naive. I know there's many Canadians who have no interest in learning about the TRC, the MMIWG report, because they're living their best life. And why shouldn't they? That was the intention of colonization, right? To live your best life. So it is a distraction of living, a high quality life, having a car, a boat, going to a vacation. But this medicine is about waking those people up. Learn about where you are, where your ancestors arrived. Learn about what was here, the depth of knowledge that was here, right? Because we just went through, in the Great Northern Plains of Canada and Manitoba, a 4-month drought. The other day, thunder came, and the Indigenous people know them as the thunders. They bring change. They bring the wind, they bring the rain. And they set things back with the way they're supposed to be. And that's our job, to set things back the way they are supposed to be. So we have to be humble. That rain may not come next year for our farmers, for the animals in the forest, for our lakes. So that's what this is about. It's about being human and learning how to live together, waking people's minds up, right? And so as we move forward, our job is to recognize when those gifts have been received and to use those tools that we are given to move forward, to end the violence. And so we send those spirits back from where they came, to the east, the south, the west, and the northern doorways, the earth below and the sky above. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Albert. That is it's not probably the most appropriate way to end today's event. is with real concrete ways in which we can all be part of the solution. And that there is something for every single person, not only who's watching, but within this room, can play in being part of that solution. And we all have a role and responsibility in that work. So no one gets off the hook here. Everybody has a responsibility to do the work. And I also want to make sure that we have a real opportunity, as we are here today, to honor our family members and survivors that have led the way, that have not given up, that continue to use their voice in all of the work, so that organizations like the MMIWG Test Center and many other organizations and many other leaders and all governments that exist, that we call for action, and that the work that we're going to be doing starts today, and it goes on. Today and much of the work has been led by many of our Indigenous women and many of our family members that really need to be credited for bringing all of us here today. And it is their words and their spirit and their ancestors and the words of their loved ones that we need to be hearing and feeling in order to move forward to build those solutions. So thank you, everybody who joined us virtually. Thank you, everybody who joined us physically. We will now, for the media who are here, Minister Bennett will be available to answer your questions shortly. And it's my pleasure to introduce Press Secretary Gillian to come up and explain how all of that is going to work. So miigwech, everyone.
Hi, everyone. We'll now start the question period. And as usual, one question, one follow-up. Nous allons maintenant commencer la période de questions. Comme d'habitude, une question et une question de suivi. We'll start in the room, and then we will go to the phone. For media, I do ask that you identify or say your name and identify your outlet. And here is Minister Bennett.
Thanks, Jillian, and I hope that if there are questions for all of the distinguished speakers, that probably is more appropriate in that they got us to this day, and I just wanted to say thank you to Albert for those very wise words, and how important it is for us to stay humble and to be able to understand that setting things back the way they were supposed to be is very much part of us after COVID, after, as we talk about building back better, a lot of people want us to do better and to be able to listen and be able to understand that those social, economic, and environmental gains that we have to make is going to happen if we listen humbly to First Nations, Inuit, and Métis, and particularly to wise people, the elders like yourself. And I, too, second Diane's recommendation that everyone needs to read the Two-Spirit chapter and the Family and Survivors chapter. But I think that the Two-Spirit chapter needs to be taught in schools in terms of how homophobia arrived on the boats, that this very special place that was held in community for the 2S LGBT, QQIA, and this morning Carol Ladner told me there were 12 Cree words for again, gender multiplicity, that Sylvia talks about. I don't know how many Mohawk words there are, but this what Sylvia was saying about being able to have 2S LGBT, QQIA plus come together as almost one word was uncomfortable at the beginning. It took us a while to figure out that it was extraordinarily important to those non-binary people that they be included in however they are referred to. And so I am very grateful for that. And I also think in this summer of reflection that people are also needing to read or reread the TRC calls to action, and particularly Volume 4 on missing children and burial information, that is, I think, how we include all Canadians in this work going forward, and understand that settler superiority, Albert, that you talked about, was so misguided when you hear the stories of Helsick or the pot latches that were banned. I remember being there when we announced the money for the big house and saying, I think in school I learned about pot latches. I don't think anybody told me they'd been banned. I think when I got elected in 1997, I had no idea the last residential school closed in 1996. That we have to stay humble in terms of how much more we have to learn if we're actually going to be part of some solutions. So thank you, Miigwech.
All right, we'll take the first question from the media now.
Michelle from APPN.
So my question is, when can we expect to, the community expect to see this turn into action?
Excellent question. I think that in terms of the money for cultural spaces, those proposals will begin to come in, and the money for families and survivors. I think that there will be the groups, the website's up, and I think that there is a place for those kinds of proposals up till September 30th, I think. Is that right, Corinne? In terms of the partners' money, I think that again there are many groups that will be able to access that dollars right away, and then there'll be new groups that we will find out about and that will be able to be part of the next tranche. So and I hope we've got the data money. Corinne will make sure we've got the data money going, and I think what we've heard is, again, are we asking the right questions? What are the gaps in our data? And again, that kind of important questions that from the learning, I think, that Stats Canada had by being part of Corinne's working group, that we're gonna be able, with the help of families and survivors, to know whether we're making progress or not. That any decent plan or complex adaptive system, you have to measure and adapt. Measure and adapt. You have to know that you're making progress, and that it will be the families and survivors that will tell us whether we're making good enough progress on the plan or whether the plan has to change. And I think that's our joint work together as we move forward.
Thank you. And my second question is, everyone spoke today about how this is a great long-term solution. That's important. But every day there are women and girls going missing and dying. What is your government doing in the short term?
So in the short term, it is having places like Mama Wichita, having the MKO group, having the kind of people who know on the ground, and that they be properly supported. That we know that the families have been asking for as long as I can remember to seek justice, healing, and to put in place the concrete actions, the prevention, to make sure no other family has to go through what they've been through, to make sure no other family has to feel that pain every day. And so we are, I think, to me, when we did the pre-inquiry, the two things that seemed to be the most missing in the policy tools was changes to child and family services, not apprehending children from their families, and being able to build that capacity within community to keep their children home and bring their children home. And so I think C92 that is helping communities, build the capacity within communities so that no child needs to be taken away, that the healthy auntie or grandparent can look after while mom gets some help, that those changes to child and family services, I think, are underway as hugely important. Having kids not age out of care with no supports at 16 or 18, I mean, honestly, it's horrific that unless you have your grandparents or your aunties or somebody to go to. And I think the other piece is the changes in policing. I think that what we've heard and what we've seen in the calls from families and communities is that having peace officers in communities so kids don't get arrested, don't end up incarcerated, to be able to help people with mental health problems be dealt with in mental health responses, not criminal responses, that I think that these are the kinds of changes that I think, as well as all of the other things that have been pointed out in the TRC calls to action, as well as in the calls for justice of the National Inquiry. We, I think, are getting there. Language and culture. That, I think when you see a young person who can speak their language, who feels confident on the land and the water, that all of a sudden they're going to be okay. They're proud of who they are, and they will make healthy choices. And I think that is, I think, the kind of communities want to build. And I think with the help of Diane and Sylvia, that we have this opportunity with Indigenous housing in urban centres to actually build Indigenous communities in our urban centres. That we haven't had that opportunity. We before just looked at the federal programming. Now we have to really listen and build Indigenous communities that have before and after school programs for elders, have language and culture, have young people grow up proud of who they are, and have those opportunities with the on the land programming that I think that so many communities and urban centers are choosing to get organized. So we want to support the short, medium, and long term to be able to, so that not only can Canadians see progress, but First Nations, Inuit, and Métis can feel progress.
Next question. All right. Operator, are there any questions on the line?
Did I accidentally turn the operator off?
Please press star 1 at this time if you have a question. Veuillez s'il vous plaît appuyer sur étoile 1 maintenant pour poser une question. There are no questions at this time. Nous n'avons pas de questions pour le moment.
Parfait. I think the panelists did such a great job answering all the questions in advance. So I want to thank the panelists for eliminating the questions. This is the best day. Yeah.